the idea of seriously analyzing something as ridiculous as this, like, almost cheapens that and me. Like,
Hello, and welcome to another episode of 1001 Album Complaints. This is the show where lifelong musicians, friends, and guys who aggressively correct each other at every opportunity get together to talk about albums from Robert Dimery's list of 1001 albums you must hear before you die. Now, we are going to give our general impressions, give our deep dives on a couple of individual tracks, and at the end, we will vote and tell you whether or not you really do need to hear this album before you die. Now, a word of caution, dear listeners, we will be making fun of this album and we will be making fun of this band. Not just because this album sucks, but that's just kind of what we do. We find all of the cracks in any artistic endeavor and we nitpick, because we do have the utmost respect for anyone who goes out there and puts themselves out creatively, but we do know that there is a lot to make fun of in any artistic endeavor. And with that in mind, this week we will be talking about the July 1st, 1987 release off of Earache, aptly named records, the album Scum by the band Napalm Death. Now, if you have never heard this melodious endeavor of, I'm sure, children's music, we are going to give you a little bit of an introduction to what we have been listening to this week by way of not the first track on the album, because that's more of a spoken word thing. We're going to go for the second track on the album, which is called Instinct of Survival. All right, now that we all know what we have been listening to, I am going to throw it around the room to our cast of characters by way of an introduction through a particularly mean tweet-length review. And I am going to go first to Adam.
hey everybody, this is Adam, and wow, what a week. I had like 9 tweet-length reviews written, but I've narrowed it down. One was me screaming for about a minute straight. But I opted for this one.
A minute seems long considering this album.
Right. Totally. This week took me back to reliving the 2024 Summer Olympic Games and the now infamous Australian breakdancer Ray Gunn. Eventually, reality caught up with her, and amongst other proficient and creative dancers, her lack of talent and creativity was laid bare for the world to see. Similarly, in the 100-meter thrash, Napalm Death could not outrun atrocious production. In grindcore gymnastics, they were disqualified for poor form and bad execution. And finally, in the death metal dressage, they came in last place because, let's be honest, they're a one-trick pony.
Oh, there we go.
Ouch.
All right. I am now going to throw it over to a special guest, first-time appearance on the podcast. Unfortunately named, so I'm going to have to refer to him from now on as Other Adam. So Other Adam, take it away.
Yeah, who fucking thought this up? Like, let's have 2 Adams on a radio show. Thank you. Hello. Yes, thanks for having me. I am very excited to be here. My tweet length review is shorter than Other Adams. For an album whose component parts fall somewhere between WWE wrestler entering the arena and a dog barking at skateboarders, Scum achieves what it's going for. Whiplash guitar, drums that kick your grandma's teeth in, and lyrics that challenge the listener to push violently back against society. I think. I didn't really understand what you said.
All right, well done. We'll give you an opportunity to properly introduce yourself later, but first we need to hear Rob's tweet length review.
Thanks so much, Tom. Excited to get into it. Here's my tweet length review. Recipe for napalm death. Take half a cup of snozberries, a sprinkling of twilight dust, 3 sprigs of rainbow sunshine, fold them together with care. Then throw it in the trash, set the entire house on fire, and begin your killing spree. Because this is a noisy, garbled disaster.
All right. And I am Tom. I will be taking us on this stroll through a sunlit meadow that is the career of Napalm Death. And my tweet length review is Scum by Napalm Death is an auditory assault that somehow, even at 33 minutes and 4 seconds, seems like it lasts forever. The band shows you all of their cards within the first 90 seconds of the album, so by the time you get to track 28, it really feels like they are beating a dead horse, or should I say, blast beating a dead one-trick pony.
Damn.
Yeah.
Nice.
Brutal.
Let's get into the general impressions, but first, other Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, man?
I'm nothing.
You couldn't have predicted this question, I know.
I put very little thought into coming here today as a thank you to having me. Yes, hi, my name is Adam. I don't know. I have a Twitch channel where I go by Mortimer Fathoms. I play video games outside.
Nerd.
Big time nerd and proud. So, if you like Diablo 2, Dark Souls 3, Elden Ring, who doesn't? Come over to my Twitch channel, Mortimer Fathoms. We play games in weird parts of the city and see what happens out in the world.
Nice. Somehow managing to play video games and touch grass at the same time. That's good.
Ooh,
I've learned a lot in the last month about like power banks and sound equipment and more than I thought I'd need to know. It's been fun.
Nice.
All right. Well, with that introduction out of the way, why don't you kick it off and tell us, how was your week, man? What were your general impressions of this album?
I really like this album.
Oh, God, I knew you would.
Yeah, you fucking invited me to this episode knowing full well what you were going to get. Also, by the way, thanks for inviting me to the Songs from the Crystal Cave episode.
What a great callback. What was that, like episode 30? Oh, fantastic. Steven Seagal, everyone. Steven Seagal.
I didn't listen to it, but I know it happened.
How dare you?
You just have to look at it.
I was pissed that my opinion wasn't considered. Hit me up when you do Mojo Priest. So I really like this album. Not necessarily because I think it's good, but I really like when people just full send it and like go in hard and fully deliver. The week listening to it, yeah, for an album whose average song length is 50 seconds, I did the math on that, it felt a little long at times, and I couldn't sit there and listen to it for like a long time in a row.
I assume when you mentioned the week listening to it, you were referring to us, the week, who can't handle this assault.
Yeah, you're pasty fucking nerds.
Listen, actually, wait, Adam, I'm going to back you up just for a second. Despite my snark, I think there are a lot of problems with this record, and I agree it felt punishingly long. And they are a one-trick pony, and I think we'll get into more depth. That said, I do think there are some cool things about this, and I do hear what you're saying, other Adam. They clearly have an idea that they're trying to execute. They go hard at it.
Absolutely.
They do it. The problem is I wish they just had some more ideas, right? They kind of default to this one sonic assault.
Yes, wall of sound.
It just sounds the same in every song. Yeah, the wall of sound. The second best wall of sound in music history, I imagine. And they run out of ideas 40 seconds into every single tune, and they just go to that well again and again and again. So, I kept feeling like the tracks were starting promisingly. I like heavy music. I like sludgy music. Of course, the vocals I don't love the vocals, but I could have put up with them if there was a little more variety and a little more creativity on display.
I also like heavy music. I mean, I'm an unabashed System of a Down fan. I went through a period in the early 2000s where I listened to Protest the Hero and some of these like really heavier bands. And To hear these guys talk about themselves, I watched a documentary that was kind of like a fan-made documentary, and they were so proud of themselves for the message that they were saying. And I'm sorry, like what you were saying in that song, it was not what the lyrics were. Like, I really think you came up with the lyrics afterwards.
Big time.
And even those, like, there's just this disconnect between really wanting to push your anti-capitalist message and not being able to convey that message because you just have a bunch of angry kids who hate their dads. Like, it's that flavor, which we've hit before, but
It really smacks of self-seriousness. That's going to be a big problem, I think, for all of us.
yeah.
I use Spotify's lyric
No, the lyric thing, yeah, same.
and I felt like I was being gaslit. I was like, there's no fucking
I
way
have that written down. Yeah,
that this guy is saying these fucking words.
Yeah. My son, actually, I was listening to it in the car, and he's just like, they're just going, so he's been walking around the house going, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. It's pretty close.
Kind of it.
The one thing that I was shocked by is how little this album rocked when they did the thing that they're most known for, because I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't like blast beats. I think that they suck, and I think that they are the least interesting and nuanced drum beat that you can possibly do. Now, for the listeners who are not familiar with what a blast beat is, trust me, you're going to get it on this show. But it's basically the drummer just hits everything on every beat as fast as he can, and there's no dynamics there.
Thank you, because I didn't know what a blast beat was, and I'm on the show.
Yes. So that's what a blast beat is. And that is what they were going for. So even when they achieve that thing, I don't like it. It's not my cup of tea. I like more dynamics and movement in music. When they weren't playing the blast beat, I actually liked what they were doing kind of a lot. It kind of rocked. It was a little heavy. But we wouldn't be talking about them if it wasn't for that aspect of it, the blast beat aspect of it.
I remembered the band that I was thinking of. It wasn't Protest the Hero. It was the Dillinger Escape Plan. And they are very thrashy, very blast beaty, but you can see them downstream from this, but they've also kind of gone another level. They've refined this sound to the point where it's something interesting. Again, I can't listen to them for a long period of time, but they took the boring blast beat and said, why don't we not use that constantly, but intermix it with some other speed metal aspects? So bands like that, I actually enjoy a lot more. But to kind of come a little bit to the defense of these guys, it sounds like they started off this movement, this just pure noise, this super fast drums. I mean, it is noise. Like, there's no getting around it, right? I will give that to him.
Oh, fair enough. But not everyone who starts a movement deserves credit. I mean, if you're going to tell me this is the greatest grindcore album of all time, I'm still not confident that it's essential. And it's interesting because it was only a few weeks ago we covered Motorhead's Ace of Spades. And on that, we talked, and I'm sure this is hard to pin down definitively, but it was alluded to, and I believe this is true, that the Motorhead drummer, Filthy Phil, is the one who created blast beats back in the late 70s on a Motorhead.
Remember that.
Now, apparently, Napalm Death were the ones who coined the term blast beat as a hook for what they were doing. I don't know how true that is, but that is, I've read that in a couple of different places. Now, I am on their side when it comes to pushing the envelope. They are pushing the envelope ridiculously on this album. And I will say that it's not my cup of tea. It's not really appealing to me, but they did pioneer a new sound and they have had a lot of impact. And so I know I'm the one who's supposed to be convincing everybody here that this is essential. I might be coming around to it that it is essential, especially considering the constraints under which it was recorded. And we will get to that later. But when you talk about shoestring budget and, the lack of prep time for this, the product is actually not as bad as you would expect it to be if you were just given this was the scenario under which they recorded. What do you think the product's going to sound like? I would have thought it would have sounded like much more of a train wreck. And they do sound like they are holding on by the barest fingertips for the entirety of the album. And for some people, that's really appealing. It gives it that kind of controlled demolition energy. Now, I'll be clear, that is not appealing to me personally, but I can understand how that is appealing to some people.
I think there just was such an opportunity here. I agree. I can be brought around for the reasons you just described, and I'm excited to hear the story here and think about it. But I thought again and again this week that there was a missed opportunity here to deploy that blast beat energy just a little bit more carefully, with a little bit more song construction, because they did write cool riffs. There was heavy, cool riffage here. Dare I say there were even a couple spots where they grooved briefly, and I was loving it. And I totally could have hung with the vocals if they had just went to that well a fewer times.
Also, I think part of the problem is that every time they go to the blast beat, the guitars and the bass basically do the same thing on every song. It's just like again and again and again. And so it's like they just picked up part of one song and dropped it in another and dropped it in another and dropped it in another and did that the entirety of the album.
They definitely did that with the first two songs when he goes back to singing about multinational corporations.
Yes. Well, Adam, you forgot to put the quotes around singing. All right.
They're all truly indistinguishable, though, for a couple, right? They do go into this other mode where they slow it down and it's a little more Sabbath. And that is when your butthole releases a little bit and you can okay, let me see what's actually going on here. And then they go right back into it. But so many of these songs, other Adam, like you were saying, they're 45 seconds and you could probably pick them up and move them around and leave the titles as they are and move the songs and no one would know.
I want to bring up one more point that hasn't come up yet, which is I was expecting, and maybe this is a vote in their corner, and maybe it's a vote against them. I'm not even sure. But I was expecting to be more shocked and freaked out. Clearly, there's a freak out the squares mentality to this band. And so perhaps it speaks to their widespread influence that this is not shocking at all anymore to hear this kind of music, this monstrous music coming out of my headphones. But it just came off to me in 2024 as boring. But perhaps that's because of their legacy. I don't know.
It's possible. It also could be because of the song construction and the way that it was all put together. We're going to get into the story of Napalm Death, leading up to and talking about the recording of Scum. But I think that to fully understand Napalm Death, we first need to do a quick history of UK punk. And I will preface this by saying this is no means exhaustive. I am not a connoisseur of punk. And I think that we have to have a baseline understanding, but we're going to just hit the hits, basically, and give you an idea of where they came from, because the story of punk is way too fascinating to cover in even one episode of this show, let alone as a preamble to another episode. So we're going to just run through it really quickly. So punk came about in the early to mid 70s with bands like the Ramones, and Television in the US were kind of precursors, Sex Pistols, the Buzzcocks in the UK, sort of developing the sound that would become known as punk rock. Punk was kind of a reaction, especially by young people, to the perceived staleness of rock and roll that resulted from the 60s musical explosion. Now, basically, what punks thought is that you had a bunch of really great musicians in the 60s that were pushing the envelope and doing something new. And then after that, you had a bunch of just people coming in that were lazy, repeating those sounds, not doing anything new, making a ton of money off of it, but not breaking any new ground. It's almost like the groundbreaking stopped in 1970 and they were sort of like, hey, where's rock and roll going? Rock and roll has become stale. And so punk was sort of a rebellion against this perception of the staleness. And so what they decided to do is they wanted to go back to the roots of rock in the 50s. And oddly enough, in an attempt to go back to the roots of rock, they created a new sound. Now, especially in the UK, punk is a cultural phenomenon as well as a music phenomenon. And it was really helped along by this thing called the pub rock scene, which was a movement in the UK where lots of small pubs started hosting bands. And that was something that gave a lot more bands that would never have been able to get a show at the big venue in town an opportunity to play to 150 people in a room, because these pubs were like, hey, bands bring in drinkers and we used to have piano players, but nobody wants that anymore. So why don't we just throw a stage on there and we'll have whatever the local artists are come and play. And it just so happened that at that time, a lot of them were inexperienced punk bands. And they were getting, again, this venue that was otherwise completely off limits to a shitty band that was barely rehearsed and hadn't been together for too long and could barely play their instruments. But it leads to this movement where people start getting into it. And that's what you like when you're, 16. I don't know what the drinking age is in the UK, but I'm assuming that they had like 12-year-olds in these bars. Yeah, right. And, when you're listening to this kind of stuff and that's what you have access to, that's what you become a fan of. And so it increased the potential buying audience for it. And that also led to this explosion in small indie labels that were putting out these DIY albums that had been recorded on the cheap by bands, doing limited run EPs and stuff like that. And so that also fuels a greater explosion because the people who can't even go to these pubs are able to buy these EPs. The zine culture comes out of that, where people are writing about their local scene, and it just leads to this kind of explosion of popularity in punk. So, punk, it basically becomes a subculture. It's defined by rebelling against the stodgy institutions. So, very shortly thereafter, when punk becomes very popular, it shatters very quickly. The vibe gets killed.
No longer punk, right?
Yeah, when the money comes in and the record labels come in and they're like, hey, maybe you should learn how to play your instruments and maybe you should write some real songs. That goes against what they were.
That's not what it's about, man.
It's not what it's about.
How dare you make money?
Yeah, seriously.
Sell out.
How dare you get better at your craft, you fucking punks. Or non-punks.
How dare you take a bunch of money?
So we've talked about this before. Punk, the rise and shattering of punk happens very, very quickly in like the late 70s, basically. So when it shatters, the scene turns into a bunch of these different subcultures. And the two subcultures that are important to our story are the anarcho-punk and crust punk subgenres.
Delightful. Fucking love those names.
Those are two different versions of punk. Now, anarcho-punks were leftist, had a lot of anti-capitalist sentiments. They viewed rock as an agent of social change. So in a lot of ways, oddly, they believed in rock a lot more than like the people that were listening to rock regularly, because they're like, back in the day, rock like meant something. Rock can mean something. Rock can push the culture forward. Rock can try to expose some of these injustices that are out there. And crust punks, I'm going to shock you, also pretty anarchist. They weren't really highly organized.
No.
Yeah. Loved central authority or anything like that. But they were also influenced by extreme metal. So this is, heavy, heavy music, very fast, lots of, evil in the lyrics. So basically, this is the backdrop under which Napalm Death is forming, because this is all happening in the late 70s. And so Napalm Death, they were originally formed in 1981 by a duo of two musicians, bassist Nick Bullen and drummer Miles Ratledge. So they're really young at the time. Nick Bullen's like 14. So this is not some, seasoned musician trying to get a new project off the ground. There's a couple of fucking kids who are like, hey man, I go to these fucking shows at 14 and I get drunk at the pub, because England in the 70s and the 80s is a fucking mess, I'm assuming. And like we can do this too. And we've talked about this with the importance of punk, is making music seem accessible, like making being in a band seem possible, because you're like, these guys suck. And yeah, exactly. If they can do it, I can do it. They don't have some secret special sauce that you need 15, 20 years of dedication to get to. They just have attitude and they have some shitty gear. And anybody can get that, right?
We did.
Yeah, we did.
Did you?
At 16 years old, yes. We absolutely had access to shitty gear.
Yeah. So after going through several terrible names, as every high school band does, they finally settle on the name Napalm Death. Now, as of right now,
it's a good name.
It's a fucking good name.
It's a good name. I would agree with that.
Yeah, for this music, it's a great name. Yeah. I don't know if I would name my next band Napalm Death.
It doesn't fit my personality.
No, it does not. I bathe too often for that, I imagine. So they have a bass player and a drummer. They recruit a guitar player. but they only managed to keep this lineup together for 2 months. And they added a bass player in early 1982 so that Nick can just sing.
They seem like such easygoing guys. You know?
I know. Listen, I will be fair, and he hasn't come up in our story yet, but the drummer on this album, Mick Harris, seems like a pretty cool guy, actually. Like, I watched a probably like 50-minute like interview / documentary that was really just him talking the entire time, and he seemed like a pretty down-to-earth and cool guy, and I appreciated his approach to life and to music. He seems like the kind of guy I could have a beer with. Anyway, though, they're going to have some personnel problems to the point where oftentimes I won't even name the people that are here. I'm just going to say this guy was here and then he's gone.
They were in the practice space for 1 hour and then left. All right, you don't need to mention them.
Practice space, Adam.
All right, I'm sorry.
Aren't there no original band members in the band now?
There's no original band members in the band now, and we're going to even get to an even worse version of that soon. So,
Oh, God.
All right, you got Nick and Miles. They've recruited a guitar player that only stays around for 2 months. They add a bass player in early 1982 so that Nick can just sing. They swap out guitar players. They swap out guitar players again. They swap out bass players. They record some demos. But the whole endeavor falls apart by 1983, and they go on an indefinite hiatus at the end of 1983, which is going to bring us to our favorite segment on this podcast, which is Napalm Death's Scum by
Jesus
the
Christ.
Numbers.
Hell yeah.
So, the first number I'm going to throw out there is 1984, as in 1,984 seconds, which is how long this album is. So, considering that there are 28 tracks on this album, that means that each song averages just over 1 minute and 10 seconds long. Adam, you did the math wrong earlier.
That's not the first time, and it won't be the last time.
Did you run a standard deviation to get rid of the outliers?
Totally. Yeah, totally.
In all honesty, how does a band with an average song length of 1 minute and 10 seconds wear out their welcome as fast as Napalm Death does? I don't know. But they have achieved it, and it is admirable. I am sure that when they were making music as these youngins, I'm the exact person that they were hoping to turn off of music. They're like, you like fucking Steely Dan.
Yeah, they're like,
and
fuck Steely Dan.
Exactly. You're like, that REO Speedwagon album is actually pretty good.
This is probably, in my thinking, what little I know about music, this is probably the least far away from Steely Dan you could get.
Yeah, this is the Steely Dan and Napalm Death. The fact that they even exist in the same thing called music,
Yeah, it's wild.
it's a little wild.
Yeah, right.
So the next number that we're going to throw out is 1,500, as in 1,500 albums pressed of Scum when it was originally released. It still seems high to me, but shows what I know, because the album sold over 10,000 copies in its first year, and although there are very few verified numbers, Mick Harris insists that it has sold over 100,000 copies total and has never been remastered. And Mick Harris insists that it never will be remastered if he has any say over it, because
I could tell.
that's the problem. Yeah, exactly. It sounds like it was recorded in an alcoholic hobo's asshole or something like that. It sounds fucking terrible.
But you were talking about like the things that make the band at least digestible. And I did see an interview, it might have been the same one, where he was talking about it captured what they put on the record, captured that moment in time. And he doesn't want to go back and remaster it because that's cheating, right? You're approaching it with a 2020 or whatever it might be mindset. But that's what we did. We want to leave it that way. So I respect that.
Yeah.
I really like underproduced things. I like when you feel like you're in the fucking punk basement and the speaker is like right in front of your face, just blasting sound into your pupils. I enjoy that. And there's a couple of songs.
You're also describing what they do to like prisoners in Guantanamo Bay with that.
Yeah.
When you say that this is what you enjoy.
You have to access a very primal part of yourself, and only then are you truly living.
That's good. That'll be the byline on the episode.
So the next number that we're going to throw out there is 10, which is the number of members that this trio had to cycle through before they even recorded their album Scum. which was technically their debut album, their debut full-length album.
Wow.
For some strange reason, they had a hard time focusing, keeping the project together. I don't know why. Can't quite figure it out. The next number is 1.316, as in 1.316 seconds, which is the Guinness Book of World Records holder for the shortest song ever recorded. And that is the song You Suffer, the last song on the A side of this album.
So on Spotify, the song was 5 seconds long.
I felt cheated by that.
Yeah, I did too. I was actually bummed out. I was like, I think that this diminishes what they were going for. Like the fact that there apparently needs to be a minimum length of time for a song.
You know who I think created that Spotify rule, if that is in fact a rule, is Wolfpack.
No way.
Because they're the ones that published the Sleepify album of all 1 second silence tracks and had their entire fan base stream it while they slept and made a bunch of money. And then Spotify closed the loophole.
Yep.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
Which, good for you, Wolfpack. I appreciate that. And even though I pay Spotify every month, they underpay their artists. So fuck Spotify. Suck all the money you can out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, they turned it into a weighty 5 seconds. It's just, it became too much to wade through for me personally.
Isn't that also You Suffer question mark? Isn't that a question?
I mean, it wasn't a question for me in this, listening to this album.
I love in this that like a bunch of the lyrics are questions.
Yeah.
And there is no attempt to make an inflection in any way that it sounds like a question.
No. Again,
Anytime.
written after the fact, I'm
Yeah.
sure. There's
Yeah.
no way these lyrics actually were real. The last number that we're going to touch on is just the number 1, as in there was only one member that participated in the recording of side A of Scum that was still in the band when they went in to record side B.
Wow.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense because there's a moment that I noted going through the album where I'm like, what the hell is happening? Something changed.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And
I
yet it
agree.
still doesn't sound different. It changed, but it still doesn't sound different.
It changed. No, I definitely like the back half better, though.
There on the back half, there are some different vocals. There's some screechier vocals. They sound like a fucking dungeon master, like role playing a quasit.
Way to get real relatable there.
If you know, you know.
I wrote that if the orc veterans of Helm's Deep had made an album, they're
The ones that have like PTSD from the battle.
Yeah, no, it's true. I actually liked it. I liked that they switched up some of the vocals and, to sound like a fucking goblin or something. Like,
I don't know if I'd say it was an artistic choice. It might have been a choice of necessity, but we'll get into that in the story. And before we get back to that story, just want to say thank you to everybody for listening. We do truly appreciate the listeners that rate and review us, write in, tell us what their experiences are, what we got right and wrong, tell a friend about it. And especially the ones that want to learn more about us and sign up to our mailing list, you can just email us at 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com with the subject line "add me." We will add you in. If you're writing us a missive about how terribly wrong we are and how Napalm Death Scum was the album that you walked down the aisle to when you got married or something like that, you can also include "add me" in the email at some point, and you will stay abreast of all the happenings, including the stuff going on our Patreon page, where we have lots of bonus content for you and lots of great listener discussion that is happening, lots of funny comments, lots of insightful comments. It really is becoming a fantastic community of people interacting with us and interacting with each other. And so feel free to hop on over to 1001 Album Complaints on Patreon. Write in, let us know that you want to be added to the mailing list, and you will be up to date on all the happenings.
Just a quick heads up that if you do write in and tell us that you walked down the aisle to Napalm Death, you will not only be added to our email list, you will be added to an FBI watch list, which I think is appropriate.
and on the Mortimer Fathoms Twitch channel, we accept all. So, if you did walk down the aisle to Scum, please come over to Mortimer
You're
Fathoms
welcome
on
over.
Twitch, and we can fucking talk about how cool that was.
Adam, the time for you plugging your shit was earlier. Okay.
No, but they're feeling generous now because they're like, oh, I'll do that. So while they're doing that, they can come to my shit.
Okay. fair
That's
enough.
smart, man. Intersperse. I do the same thing. The atoms think alike.
Yeah, this is about networking. No, go to their thing. Don't go to my thing.
So, we're going to get back to the story of Napalm Death leading up to and including Scum. So, we're going to level set. They have gone on indefinite hiatus in 1983. They had cycled through a whole bunch of members, but Nick and Miles were still in the band. That's a bass player and a drummer. So during this time, Nick meets Justin Broderick, and he actually joins Justin's band called Final for a short period of time. In 1985, Napalm Death reforms with Nick on bass and vocals, Miles on drums, two other guitar players whose names are not important because the project falls apart after one show.
Oh, Jesus.
The two guitar players leave, but Nick asked Justin Broderick to join after that because he's like, hey, we just played in a band together and I'm trying to keep this Napalm Death project going, so why don't you come join the band? Justin joins the band. They play their first show as a trio with Miles on drums in August of 1985. They are still very much in the post-punk, punk world, but they're starting to incorporate more thrash metal into their sound. They added a new bass player. They recorded a demo. Again, the project falls apart. Nick and Justin want to explore more extreme music. Miles Ratledge, the drummer, isn't really on board for that. And it also kind of sounds like he couldn't quite keep up with the tempo that they were trying to push in the band. And so they say, hey, you know what? We need to find a new drummer.
Couldn't blast.
That's good. So enter Mick Harris. Mick and Justin Broderick became friends in November of 1985. They meet at their local Birmingham pub called the Mermaid. That was a hangout for many kinds of people on the fringe of society, hardcore punks, rockabilly types, all the crust punks are hanging out there. Justin knew that Mick was a drummer, and, you know, shocker, Napalm Death's having some personnel issues. They need to make a change. So they were looking to play faster and harder, and Mick was the drummer of a local hardcore band called Anorexia. So they knew that he could play fast, and they're like, hey, why don't you come and join the band? And Mick was actually a fan of the band because he had been going to see them at the Mermaid for a really long time and had thought that they were doing some cool stuff and pushing the envelope. Now, the Mermaid was a local Birmingham venue that was one of those venues that cropped up during the pub rock movement. It was a small venue, held about 400 people. Apparently it was owned by a nice older Asian family that were kind of just like, yeah, you know, like whatever. And it became the center of this like hardcore punk scene in Birmingham.
Lucky them.
That's amazing.
They sound like the type of people who wouldn't come in and, you know, tip well or drink a whole lot. I feel like they would just come in, watch, and leave.
Yeah.
Do you know, were they immigrants?
I think they were immigrants. Yeah.
Can you fucking imagine that story? Like I immigrated away from whatever the fuck was going on in my country, opened an establishment which became like a hardcore metal fucking venue.
Yeah, you're like, man, I came from like Bangladesh or someplace with like extreme poverty, and I come here and all these like middle class kids are like, fuck Britain, it fucking sucks. They're like, this is my dream. You understand that? I fought so hard for this.
It's so fucking good.
Yeah. So the Mermaid's promoter, this guy named Daz Russell, he's a big promoter of the hardcore scene, but apparently the atmosphere there was really positive. Mick Harris said that he went there for years and years, was at like basically all the shows, and never one time saw a fight the entire time that he was there.
The safest I've ever felt was in the mosh pit.
Yeah. You know, punks are actually pretty nice people. Scary looking, but nice people in general.
Right.
I'm not joking, too. I feel a great sense of community whenever I mosh.
Well, now I got to go mosh.
Yeah. When was the last time you
43-year-old
moshed?
dad. Let's do it. Let's go.
Adam, you will throw your back out in 40 seconds. In the
No way,
mosh
dude.
pit.
I am not as out of shape as you are. I could do so many cartwheels
didn't
right
say
now.
other Adam. I said Adam.
Oh, okay. Good.
Oh, yeah. I would die.
Yeah.
Adam is this Adam. Other Adam. God damn it. All
Yeah.
right, screw
Who
it.
fucking thought this?
You're the
thought
only one
this
who
would
can't
be a
keep up
good
with it,
idea?
other Adam. Come on. Get on board.
I'll mosh with you, Adam.
So he'd actually, again, he'd seen them play for quite a while, and he's kind of stoked to join the band. So again, we're going to give a timestamp here. It's December of 1985. Mick has his tryout for the band, and the tryout consists of Justin coming to Mick's parents' house and they jam in Mick's room. And I got to tell you, I saw the room and I saw the house. It's a small house and it's a duplex and it's a small room. These must be the most understanding people in the universe.
I feel like jam needs even bigger quotes than sing.
Yeah, right.
I was going to say, what does that consist of?
They just smash their instruments in each other's presence for 40 minutes and are like, man, I like your style, man. It's pretty good.
This song's called Animal from the Muppets Snorts Adderall.
Yes. Animal from the Muppets. Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. All right. So, January 1986, the band gets a rehearsal space, which means that up until then, they haven't really been rehearsing.
No.
Amazing.
Yeah. And to hear Mick tell it, like, their rehearsals were the shows that they played. Like, that's how they would rehearse. And it's just really considerate of the crowd when you work your shit out on stage live in front of people who paid to see you. That's just a cool thing to do. I really appreciate that when I have that experience.
They feel part of it. They feel part of the experience. They're part of the band.
Yeah.
It's not about the money, man.
Yeah. Well, they get their first gig.
You sound like a multinational corporation.
You do.
All right. So, January of 1986, early January, they get a rehearsal space. At this point, the band is Mick on drums, Justin on guitar, Nick on bass and vocals. So they get their first rehearsal space in January of 1986. And on January 18th of 1986, they play their first gig. So that is like how unrehearsed this band is. They basically like, fuck it. We're going to play our first gig. And hey, where'd they get their first gig? It's the Mermaid, of course. It's
Nice.
the epicenter of the scene. And so they were playing shows, but not a ton of shows. They mostly played at the Mermaid. Occasionally they would play outside of Birmingham, but not a ton of shows, certainly no touring or anything like that. They recorded demo in March of 1986. And then in August of 1986, they go into Rich Bitch Studios to record what becomes the A-side of their album Scum.
Do we know who else was recording at Rich Bitch Studio?
I mean, I think all of the people from that scene, but frankly, I had to do a lot of research just to be able to get the storyline of this band together. I'm not trying to get the storyline of some other shit studio together too.
I just love thinking of some fucking 80s pop band. Like some kind of like fucking Blondie ripoff.
They only record the first 16 tracks on the album.
Only
16 tracks only.
So about 4 minutes of music.
Because their assumption is that this is going to be a split EP with another band, but that falls apart. And so they are left with just the 16 songs that they've recorded. All right. So they booked the overnight session at Rich Bitch Studios because they are fucking poor bitches and cannot afford anything better. They said it was an 8-hour session, cost £120. And in one 8-hour session, they record and mix the 16 tracks that make up the first side of this album. So half an hour a song to record and mix.
That's pretty impressive.
Did you get any sense of, is the short song part of the punk aesthetic? Like, what is that part about specifically?
Yes, that is part of this particular type of aesthetic that they were going for, which is not overly written and not, not overly fussy. A whole bunch of parts. You got a bridge in your song. What the fuck's wrong with you type of shit. It's just get in, get out, move on,
I feel like most punk songs are pretty short. Like, give me a Ramones song that is over 4 minutes. I think there's like 3 of them.
Yeah, but there's a big difference between over 4 minutes. You're talking about conforming to the 3-minute old school standard of pop music, which is, I think, what bands like the Ramones were doing.
Rob, I don't
right?
know what the fuck I'm talking about, man.
This is 1 minute songs and below, right?
Yeah.
The Dwarves do that quite a bit. Blood, Guts, and Pussy.
Yeah, of course. That's what I walk down the aisle to.
But now I'm going to go Google that.
But again, they were pushing everything kind of to the max. So if punk songs are short, our songs are going to be shorter. God damn it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Just seems like they might have created more work for themselves. I mean, they could have just looped these parts a couple more times, right?
Yeah.
Would we have really known the difference? Would the audience know the difference?
Song would have gotten stale by the end of it, Rob. You know, you got to keep it fresh. Keep it fresh. So these sessions were live mic'd, meaning that there's just mics in the room. There's no separation. You don't have a drummer and a bass player and a guitar player all recording with the ability to fix mistakes on individual tracks. You take it all or you get rid of it all. Yes, you can tell. I mean, they spent a half an hour a song to record and mix. And as we've all been in a studio before, you don't walk in and, 8:01, you're like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you record for 8 hours. There's an hour of setup at least to get everything
right.
Yeah.
You're setting up the instruments and then you're getting levels for probably another half
If they
hour.
were getting levels.
Oh, yeah.
Honestly. They're like, everything's turned all the way up. Okay.
There is cymbal noise on everything. 100% of the time I can hear cymbals.
Yeah.
But do you think that is why it sounds like a wall of sound? Is because it's just everything's not distinguished or distinct from each other. It's just one mic picking up everything all at once.
To be fair, it's not one mic.
Oh.
So they had an 8-track recorder, which means that they probably had 1 track for drums, 1 track for guitars, 1 track for vocals, and then maybe a room mic, and then probably 4 mics on the drum kit. And so
you lied to me.
No, I didn't lie to you. It says live mic'd, man. It doesn't matter. Like those, trust me, those mics on the bass amp were picking up the drums. The mics on the drums were picking up the bass. They're all picking up the vocals.
Yeah, that means every mic picked up the cymbal hits, right? Because they were all just in the same room. Whereas sometimes in the studio, people have baffles or the amps are in different rooms and they're wearing headphones or some of that stuff.
Or certainly you're recording vocals separately from the entire band in the same room.
I'm learning so much.
I remember an interview with the guy, the producer on the Lenny Kravitz album was saying that he would jokingly label the drum mics on the board, snare, mostly tom, snare, mostly hi-hat, snare, mostly, because the snare was everywhere. When you're recording drums, the snare, and I suppose the cymbals as well, are just bleeding into every mic. So yeah, it's very hard to do any kind of separation in that scenario.
Yeah. And I imagine the room probably wasn't very acoustically sound, and so there's all kinds of bouncing going around and stuff like that. And yes, other Adam, that is a component of why this all comes at you, because if you want to turn one thing up, you basically turn everything up in the mix. I also imagine that their instruments were turned all the way up.
Yeah, why not?
Oh, yeah.
No, there's a good reason why not. It doesn't sound good. That's why you don't do that.
Well, but how many albums have you sold?
Yeah.
It's not that far from 10,000, to be fair to us.
Yeah, it's really actually not that far.
Hell yeah.
That's great.
So the guitar sound on the front side of the album is all due to Justin's use of an MXR distortion pedal, which is like a pretty basic distortion pedal.
Yeah.
And I'm also guessing that the knobs were broken because he didn't change them in between songs.
I think you just crank them all to 11, man.
Exactly.
Everything is up all the way. I think that is an aesthetic. And I feel like I've learned to just crank everything on the instrument itself. But then if you go to the amp and then you start cranking that's where you start to get into problems, right?
Yeah, that's definitely problematic. So they record the A side of this album, which remember is less than 20 minutes long. They'd expected it was going to be part of a split with another band, but they're left with this 20-minute recording. And they expect that a record label is going to just put that out as is. I mean, like, yeah, here's the Napalm Death, debut full, quote unquote, full length album at 19 minutes. And that doesn't happen. And Justin particularly was looking to be in a band that had some more heat, was touring, could potentially have some real success, maybe actually make a little bit of money, which again, the anarcho anti-capitalist punk band is like, but we're not making enough money. Maybe I should do something else. When that doesn't materialize and when no record label wants to put this out, he starts to look around for different opportunities. There's a local band called Head of David that's looking for, of all things, a drummer. And so they say, hey, who would be the perfect drummer for our band? The guitar player from Napalm Death. He'd be a great drummer for our band. Yeah. So he gets offered and he leaves the band in October of 1986.
Are you implying he wasn't a drummer? I mean, it was just like his arms can move fast. We've seen them move fast.
I have no evidence that he was a drummer before this, but Head of David was kind of like a bigger band in the scene, and they were touring like at least around England, and they were playing a lot more shows. Because remember, Napalm Death doesn't even play that many shows. It's not like they're playing every night at the Mermaid. They're playing a show like every month or two.
Well, that's how long it takes his voice to recover, I assume.
Yeah, Jesus Christ, yeah.
Head of David is a terrible band name, by the way.
It is a terrible band name. Yeah, that's a very bad band name. All right, so Justin is frustrated, leaves the band. They've recorded just over 19 minutes of music. Nobody wants to put it out. But they say, hey, you know what? I think we can keep this project going. And Mick recruits a friend of his to play guitar in the band. Thinks he can still continue the project. And this is actually kind of the most fascinating part of the story for me, is the hand that the drummer took in keeping this project going. Because that's not generally what drummers do. I've played with lots of drummers, and not a single one of them was like the organizing principle in the band.
Yeah.
It's not a knock on them either. It's just it doesn't tend to be, they don't tend to be the primary songwriters. They don't tend to be the people who are like running the business. They're kind of just like, guys, show up and play the drums. It's great. I hit shit. It's fantastic. So, but Mick, he gets his friend to play guitar in the band, thinks that they can still continue with the project. However, around the same time, Nick is getting frustrated that the band is becoming too metal and getting away from their sort of punk roots, and he's starting to lose interest in the project altogether. It also does not help that he is apparently a raging alcoholic at this time and would show up to practice pants shitting drunk, just incoherent, not able to function. And he's doing this at gigs too. It's a fucking total mess.
Is this when we play Is This Punk?
No, but
Shitting your pants on stage.
this is all punk. All right. This is all punk.
Depends on what you do with the shit after that. That's what G.G. Allen taught us.
Oh, God. Yeah. Ugh. All right. So they decide, well, Nick's showing up completely shit-faced and baby pantsed. We need to get somebody to play the bass. He cannot be relied upon to be the bass player, but he can still sing. So they recruit a bass player, this guy, Jim Whiteley, to join on bass. They play a few shows as a quartet, but shortly thereafter, things come to a head, and at a rehearsal in March of 87, remember, they recorded in August of 86, side A, and then in October of 86, Justin leaves of the trio, and now we're getting to March of 87, and Nick shows up to a rehearsal completely blasted. Mick Harris confronts him about his general lack of interest, and is basically like, do you still want to be in this band? Apparently, Nick does not say anything, turns around, walks out of the room, and Mick Harris says he doesn't see him for 4 years until 1981 when he sees that he's in another band that's playing in the area, but just like completely gone, no contact, didn't say a word, turned around and walked out. And then also like wasn't going to shows and on the scene. Sounds like maybe he was just wallowing in alcoholism for a while.
Maybe he just shit his pants and he was too embarrassed to bring it up.
It's possible. I was giving him credit that maybe it was like a Jesus in the wilderness thing. He just had to go away for a little bit and fucking figure some shit out. So now Mick Harris, the last member to join before they recorded the A side of this album, is the only remaining member of the band. He's not a founding member. He only joined like a year ago.
That was quick.
That's insane.
So a lot of people would have said fuck it and moved on, but Mick decides that he's going to reconstitute the band. He gets the buy-in from Jim Whiteley to stay on bass, and he recruits 2 more musicians, Lee Dorian on vocals and Bill Steer on guitar.
Just one quick pause. We mentioned that the name was great. I think the name is what's holding them together at this point. They're like, we got a good name. We got to keep going.
Yeah, I can't go into another band that's just going to be called like, The Fervent or something like that. Like,
or
stupid
fucking Head of David.
Goliath's Hog.
I heard him talk about one of the other bands they played with was called Conflict.
Hell yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So disgusting.
But, if you're a crust punk, what do you think that crust comes from?
Yeah. Oh, God.
Imagine the smell.
Oh, yeah, at those shows. Good Lord. Oh, my God. So anyway, he's got Bill Steer and he's got Lee Dorian involved. Now, one of the problems is that Bill Steer lives in Liverpool, which is like a 2-hour drive from Birmingham. And Lee lives in Coventry, which is only about a half-hour drive from Birmingham. But like these guys don't seem like they got car money. And so I'm guessing it was probably like riding the bus. Actually, you know what? I will take that back. Bill Steer had actually been kind of successful as a musician before joining Napalm Death. He was the guitarist for a, quote, extreme metal band called Carcass.
Hell yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's
I
good.
like that.
Yeah, that's tight.
Yeah. So he was in Carcass when they recorded Scum. He was just sort of like, yeah, you know, I'll come and record with you. Carcass is kind of a going concern. And so he thinks that the band's sounds are somewhat simpatico, but spoiler alert, when it comes down to it and he's forced to choose, he does not choose Napalm Death and chooses Carcass. So we're going to level set. It's March of 1987 when Nick leaves the band, and Mick recruits a new guitarist and a new vocalist. And the B-side that we're talking about was recorded in April of 87. So this is a month later, they go in to the studio to record. Now, apparently, they had one rehearsal the evening before they went in and recorded this.
Hold on a second.
I mean, that sounds like a lot for what shows up on the tape.
Let's clarify, because rehearsal typically means I am rehearsing the songs that are written. But it sounds like what you mean is we had one evening to write and practice the songs.
No, that's not exactly true, because Mick Harris wrote all of the songs on the B-side. Now, he had gone and met up with Bill Steer on 2 separate occasions to kind of go over what he thought the songs were going to be. And, you know, they can't write sheet music or anything like that. So he's kind of just like miming out, this is what we think it's going to be.
You mean except for the cover of Fly Me to the Moon on there?
Yeah, exactly. With somehow more flute than the Sinatra. Yes.
Can I posit a question into this forum?
Of course.
What do we think these people are doing that is taking their time away from rehearsing?
That's a very good
They
point.
have to be working jobs, because there's no way this is paying the bills, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
And they have to be drinking a lot, because there's no way that you can listen to this kind of music sober. So,
But it's kind of hard to do both of those things, like drink and maintain a job.
Many have done it, other Adam.
it's been done. Yes.
That's true.
Oh, man. So, yes, they did get together. You know, the drummer and guitar player got together to kind of go through some stuff beforehand. But these are all songs that have, you know, been written by Mick Harris. And when they did that rehearsal, the night before the recording again, Lee Dorian actually didn't even participate in the practice. He was there, but they hadn't figured out like where the vocals were going to come in. So during the actual recording process, every single time that Lee Dorian comes in, he's literally being visually cued by somebody like pointing at him and being like, start now, every time he starts to sing.
Listen, Phil's not here tonight for music nerdery, but the guy's name is Dorian. Do you think there's even a chance that he's ever heard of the Dorian scale?
Dorian scale?
No.
I would say that there's a chance he's heard of scales. A chance. So the B-side, recorded in April 1987, also at Rich Bitch Studios in Birmingham. All 16 tracks recorded and mixed in one 8-hour session. 120 pounds for an 8-hour session. So the album was mixed and recorded in 2 8-hour sessions, costing a total of 240 pounds to actually get this musical product committed to tape.
Damn.
That's impressive.
That is. Yeah, I'll give that to you.
So one of the things they talk about is on the B-side, Bill Steer tuned his guitar down a whole step for the recording, giving that kind of heavier, sort of like more loosey-goosey sound. Justin on the first side had his guitar tuned to standard tuning. And so you can definitely tell that's that sort of feel change when they get to the more kind of slinky, heavier sound on side 2, because he tuned down a whole step, which is a lot to tune down your entire instrument.
Oh, we haven't mentioned it yet, but they're from Birmingham, which is the same place Black Sabbath are from. And I feel like they really pioneered down tuning. In fact, I think Iommi used to tune down to a C sharp, which would be a a step and a half.
But it was
yeah, because I think we heard on our Black Sabbath episode, right, that it was based on his fingers and that machining accident. And he needed them to be looser, but
yeah.
Oh, these guys are from England? That explains why I can't understand him, because of the accent.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
I actually was like thinking about these guys having a cup of tea and just the idea.
Pinkies up, gentlemen.
right.
Yes.
You know, I was actually getting a massage at one of these new age spas the other day, and they were playing this, and I asked who it was, and I was pleasantly surprised.
All right. So they have their full-length album recorded. They need to get this important piece of work out into the world. The first time they couldn't get any label backing for just the A side, but now they have a complete album. They approach a small indie label, aptly called Earache Records, run by a guy named Digby Pearson. He had founded it in between the time when side A was recorded and when side B was recorded. Basically, he would have released side A as it was, and then probably the project would have fallen apart. So the fact that there was a little bit of a gap and it allowed Mick Harris the time to congeal a new version of the project really makes it, I think, have a little bit more legs as a project. Not that many more legs, though. So, as we said, they only printed 1,500 copies. It ends up becoming an underground hit, sells 10,000 copies in its first year, aided along by infamous British tastemaker John Peel, who took a liking to the band, promoted them on his show, and they actually record 2 Peel sessions after the release of Scum. Now, we're at the release of the album. We're going to get into some tracks, but just as a quick postscript, the band basically breaks up pretty damn shortly thereafter this and can't make it happen, even though they have what I am sure blew their expectations out of the water in terms of success with this album. Ugh. Are you ready to get into some of these tracks?
Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
First, I want to give a kudos to Tom for sorting through this mess and trying to pick anything. I mean, this was, I think, kudos to us as well. I haven't heard your comments on these songs, but my God, it was hard to come up with thoughts for all of these.
Yeah.
Just my initial take there.
Yeah. So we played the first real song, or some might not say it's even a real song, but we played Instinctive Survival at the top of the episode. We're not going to subject you to this again. We're just going to move on past, and we're going to go to the title track on the album. This is the song Scum. Other Adam, tell me why you think that this is a good song.
My notes say Scum as like the header, and then right underneath that it says is tight.
That's going to do it for us tonight. We want to thank you for joining us.
I like most notably what I have written down here, and I can't actually like sitting here remember specifically the song because it fades into the fucking cacophony that's the rest of the album. But I will say, I remember the drums, and they have like this arena rock, like bigger feel to them at the beginning. And I appreciate that that's in there.
Yes.
It's different from some of the other tracks that came before it. I think it happens a few more times on some of the tracks that come after it, but I appreciate that little bit of sound injection that comes in. And in some ways, I think it makes this song a little more accessible and like a little more conventional. So, you know, this is the one you play on the radio.
I'm sure this is the one John Peel was playing on the radio. But Adam, to your point, this sounds like a song because there's a little bit of dynamics between the parts. The parts sound a little different from each other. And that's what a song is. Different parts that go together and hopefully complement each other, or sometimes radically don't complement each other in a great way. But yeah, this one minimizes the blast beat. So this is actually the highlight of the album for me. There's only 47 seconds of blast beat in this song.
Yeah.
So if you cut out the 47 seconds of blast beat, I actually quite like the song. That is, however, about a third of the song.
Again, just a thing I really like about this song, which happens in a few songs on the album, is they fucking end the song with a guy just going, bleh. And like, that's the end of the song.
And then you look at the lyrics and it's like the verisimilitude of the government is not incredible.
That is great. So I also called this my favorite. I think it starts off really cool. First minute, like they get a whole minute in without doing the full sonic assault blast beat thing. And that's in most of their songs are a minute, like we said, right? But they're like, no, we can't have a song without that, without our signature. So then it kind of descends from there. But yeah, this is the best song, I think.
I get why they either named the album after this song or they called this the title track. Because again, this is the most accessible and the most that sounds like a quote unquote real song. And I actually kind of like the bass at the beginning. If everything didn't sound like that, I think, again, we did the Motorhead a couple weeks ago, starting songs off with a dirty, distorted bass. I was actually like, oh, this is kind of cool. Maybe there will be more of this at some point. And it never materialized. But yeah, I dug this tune.
So Mick Harris claims that they were very Joy Division influenced. Yeah. And apparently Nick Bullen is a big Joy Division fan. And so that was something that they were trying to get across in their sound. And I am not a big Joy Division fan, but I will say, even I will stand up for them with the slander of saying that they are somehow responsible for Napalm Death.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
So I think the biggest problem that I have with this album in general, and specifically with the blast beat, is that it is used and deployed so formulaically, where it comes in when the vocals come in, and then it ends when the vocals end. And so every time you get vocals, it's just, and then the song starts again, basically. And that, to me, is kind of the most unforgivable thing about a project where you're attempting to push the envelope, that you just immediately fall into this rut of formulaic approach to your songs.
Yeah, totally agree. It feels lazy.
Yeah, it really does.
It's really weird how formulaic these songs are, considering how chaotic the sound is. It's very strange to me that those two things exist at the same time across this album.
Well, and for something that's as aggressive and heavy, I don't think this album particularly rocks. It rocks at times, but I feel like when they are trying their hardest to rock you the hardest, they rock the least.
I would agree. I actually, something that was interesting that happened to me while I was listening to this, I was kind of on the bus, just going around the city, lugging a backpack full of video game stuff around. And after a while, it just kind of faded into the background, and it sounded, it was interesting. It felt like background music, which you wouldn't really think about when you listen to this. But because it's such a monolithic wall of sound at most of the time, I was able to just kind of tune it out, which is not a good sign.
That would probably be the biggest insult to them, is that, number one, you're boring, and number two, I can easily tune you out, because they're very clearly trying to get in your face and get your attention, and you're like, nah, can't get my attention, and what you're trying to do that's fresh and new is actually really boring.
Ironically, that's where remastering would have helped them, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, while that was happening too, I would find that I was like, my mind was wandering, and then I'd check back in and be like, oh, what are these guys doing? And it's, you know,
the same
everything's
thing.
terrible, life is suffering, fuck you, you human garbage. And I'm like, oh, it's just, this is like having anxiety. Cool. Okay, we're
all right, we are going to go on to the next song on our focus list, and we are still on the A side of the album. This is the song Control. What I thought was really interesting about this is that this felt punk. This felt more punk to me, and I think it's the drum beat, that boom bop 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 boom bop, that kind of really fast punk drum beat there. It comes more centered in the punk world, less centered in the extreme metal world. And so, you know, I can see why when Mick was writing songs that were more like the B-side, if this was something that Nick Bullen had written and was really into, he's clearly still trying to move in the punk direction, and Mick Harris is trying to go in the hardcore and extreme metal direction.
Serious question. What do we think writing means in this context?
All right, so I have a theory here, because this is the one song where I wrote down, I really think he's screaming mind control, and then after the fact, they're like, wait, we got to be against fascism and capitalism. Let's write down that I said fascist control. It's like, no, you can't do that, dude. You said mind control.
It's one of the secret benefits of being in a grindcore band is you can just write the lyrics after the album comes out.
You know what's interesting? This is one of those only songs where I felt like as I was reading along, I could actually distinguish the words that he said.
Right.
Yeah. I felt like, okay, he's not gaslighting me into.
Yeah. Well, you know, Nick Bullen is credited with developing the grindcore growl, which I don't think you need to have explained to you if you've listened to this album at all. You know exactly what it is. It has caught on for some reason. Like you said, lots of bands are doing it nowadays. It's not my thing, but it's a lot of people's thing. So, you know, good for them. I found that one of the interesting things about this song is you get to like 52 seconds in, and there's like coordinated hits between the drums and the guitar. And I was like, oh, you actually have some coordination here. Some songs on this album, I feel like, were recorded where the instruments had no knowledge of what the other players were doing. They're not
Right.
coordinated in any way, shape, or form.
They're just watching the drummer's hands, and when he starts moving them fast, they're like, oh, I guess I should play fast now. And you're right. And Tom, that's a great point. So if the blast beat thing is done well, and if the guitars weren't as distorted and they were cleaner, and maybe they were hitting around the same time, it might be impactful. It might do something to you. But everything is such just mush with the hi-hat go shh. It's
Yeah. And again, the guitars and bass are doing kind of cool riffs, and then the blast beat kicks in and they just go you're like, oh no. Keep playing the cool riff.
right.
The blast beat hits on every beat, so you're going to be on the beat. You know, it's not like you'd be off the beat. Let's go on to the next song on our focus list. It is the song Human Garbage. got a hell yeah for this one?
Yeah.
I wrote, whoa, actual drumming.
So I think that they took a different approach to this one, where they put the blast beat right up front. And then you get past it, and they're like, all right, here's your reward, actual music after that. Yeah.
I was just looking for any sonic differences in the material. And so the idea that there was that drum intro, it at least, caught my ear. So I like this one a bit better.
It sounds a little more upbeat to me, which is like, talk about your air quotes. Yeah. But there's something about there's like a crispness to the drums here. And
you read the lyrics and he's like, I've fallen in love for the first time with a beautiful woman.
There is a song that's not on our focus list that I think he wrote out of heartbreak, and it's like, it's very fucking funny.
Laughing at his pain.
Yeah. I mean, this is, frankly, I'm sorry any Napalm Death fans out there, but this album is laughable. At many points during this album, I just laughed. Like, oh my God.
I did have a moment at the top, and I wanted to bring it up, where the idea of seriously analyzing something as ridiculous as this, like, almost cheapens that and me. Like,
Well, that's a summation of our podcast thus far, if I ever heard one.
Oh, yeah.
Too good for human garbage, huh?
to put on your headphones and really listen and be like, oh, yeah, I see what he did there with the wordplay of feces or whatever it is. It's like, no, this is not, I don't know.
Adam, I did find myself, I did do a lot of yard work this weekend. It's a glorious weekend here in the city. Beautiful. And I was listening to this while I was doing some of it. At one point, I'm like sitting in the backyard in the sun with my legs crossed, like enjoying myself and listening to this. I was like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? Like, how is this the solution to my boredom?
Yeah, I think there was one point where I was listening to this fucking album, and like, I was at Golden Gate Park, and like there were like children playing and like laughing, and it just like, fuck, man, your outlook on life has to be so bad.
Yeah, you're just like walking out like, there's like a 1 in 50 chance one of those kids is going to get leukemia in the next 2 years.
Yeah, this actually brings up a separate question that I have, which is a semi-serious question. So many of the lyrics are about like suffering and life suffering. I wonder what the Venn diagram here is between like Buddhism and fucking grindcore and like metal that focuses on the suffering of life.
It's like they both go on to extremes of like Buddhism is like extreme quiet contemplation, and this is like extreme auditory assaults, and they end up at the same position.
Yeah, the same endpoint, basically.
Interesting. Well, philosophy is a flat circle. I don't know where we go on that one.
Thanks, Matthew McConaughey.
We're going to go on to the next song on our focus list. This is the song You Suffer. And now we're going to go on to the next song on our focus list. This is the song Point of No Return.
No, I'll be the first to say it. Bravo, Napalm Death.
Yes.
Bravo. Yes.
I'll be the second.
This song, which I'd never heard before this week, almost made the record worth listening to. I'm being serious. I really appreciate this accomplishment. And if you weren't complete pussies, you would have made 504 more songs like this to round out the album.
In all honesty, the fact that he gets in like 6 drum hits in the 1.3 seconds there, it's actually kind of impressive.
Most artistic endeavors start with, what world records can I break? I think that's a good place to start your exploration of the human soul.
I think it's a good showcase for them. I really do.
I mean, the lyric of the song is, you suffer, but why?
No way.
That's what he says.
No, it's not.
Man.
Isn't it? He goes, that's what I was gonna say. He states you suffer, but why? But it's just, I mean, fuck that.
Yeah. All right, now we're really gonna go on to the next song on our focus list. We are now on to the B side of the album. This is the song Point of No Return.
I would like to say that Point of No Return is a surprisingly poignant commentary on the selfishness of humans. We create what we want, and we give zero fucks about what it means for the generations that follow.
You know, I got a little confused because somewhere in the middle of the week I made my own playlist version of the album, and I put the Pina Colada song right in the middle just to kind of break things up. Are we not going to talk about that?
No, I don't think we're going to talk about the Pina Colada song, although I'm sure these guys were really into fruity, sugary, rum-based drinks, definitely. Seems like they're seen.
Any drink, maybe?
Yeah. You know, these guys are clearly beach guys. You know, some guys are just beach guys, and, you know, you can see them in their slippers and their, you know, open Hawaiian shirts.
Strong Beach Boys influence here.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, I think if I had been in this band, I would have been advocating for adding like a acoustic wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald cover on this album just to throw people off.
See, Rob, that's why you're a visionary, right? So this is the worst song on the Focus list, in my opinion. And the reason is they come in and it's blast beat, blast beat, blast beat. And they trick you. At 20 seconds in, he gives it a pause for 2 seconds. You're like, oh, now they're going to kick into the no, blast beat, blast beat, blast beat for the rest of the song. It's like, fuck you. You gave me some hope for like 2 seconds and then just...
I also wrote that this was the low point. Yeah, I felt like nothing interesting happens in this song.
The only interesting thing is at the end when he goes, "Wah!" Yeah.
I feel like the vocals are particularly bad in this. I wrote down, it sounds like somebody being smothered to death and fighting for their life. Like...
They would love that, by the way.
Yes, that is the best compliment you could give them.
Yes.
You'd have to say a child, and then they'd be like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, then they'd be like, yeah.
At this point in my listening experience, I did need a palate cleanser, and I mentioned it on the text thread that I went and listened to the Kansas song Point of No Return, which could not be any further away.
This is a note for note cover of that, right? Yeah.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Right.
Kansas would be another band that Napalm Death was actively rebelling against. So if there are any Napalm Death fans still listening, they're excited to know that we like Kansas and Steely Dan.
You guys are weak. I did this one raw all the way through.
Oh, well done, sir.
All right, now we're going to go on to the last track on our Focus list. It is the song Moral Crusade.
Look, this is a terrible listen, but I do feel like it's a very honest portrayal of who they're trying to be as a band. They're just yelling at you and trying to freak you out. And it has probably the most variety on the entire record.
It kind of sounds like you almost get a little solo at the beginning. It also could just be the guy's hand cramped on the guitar and started to fall apart.
This song actually has some really fucking cool lyrics. And like, obviously, yeah, whatever. We can't understand what he's saying. But there's some like the written lyrics as they appear on Spotify are pretty cool. Like he says some cool shit. Pious, holy to the hilt. I think that's a fucking rad ass, very metal thing to say. Your puritanical dream It's fucking cool. I don't know.
So,
pretty
which of the two screaming voices was saying those lines? Because we do get double scream in this one. We get growl and then we get shriek happening at the
werewolf
same
shriek,
time.
yeah.
I feel like that was new.
It's like Goblin and the Bear. Describe those two voices. I wrote in my notes at one when that like high pitched voice came in. I wrote, they introduced a new character.
I'm pretty sure that's Mick Harris that is screaming there while he's playing the drums.
Okay. Oh, all right. Well,
Yeah.
that's something.
It's cool. I like the lyrics on this one. Reading them.
Yeah, reading them, not experiencing them shouted at you. All right, I think it is time that we wrap this up and get to the most anticipated part of the show where we vote and tell you whether or not you really do need to hear this album before you die. Ooh, I got to tell you, audience, I don't know. I don't know how this one's going to go. I'm going to throw it first to Original Adam.
Thank you, Tom. So I started this episode honestly not knowing where I was going to go. I was hoping, and Tom, I think you did a great job telling the story of the band. I just don't know that their story is that compelling. That mixed with the end product, which I just can't get behind. I think we've crushed it pretty mercilessly on this episode. Guys, I appreciate what you do. Playing blast beats for even a minute is not an easy task, so good job on that. But I am going to say no on Napalm Death's Scum.
Adam, I think we were actually kinder than I was expecting we were going to be to this album. I have to be honest. So
I think the fact that we laughed so much about it is the unkind part.
yeah.
Oh man, we're tough. Don't laugh at us.
All right. Other Adam, what say you, sir?
How often do you get to listen to like 28 songs or whatever in 33 minutes? Do it. Just do it. I think it's worth listening to. Not because it's like particularly good.
It's not.
Yeah. But I like I said at the top, like I really like when people full send and they really just fucking went for it. And like, you know, there's something to be said for that. Like I love the Talking Heads, but I don't love 77. It's a great album, but I think they did better stuff later. I guess what I'm saying is like, this is the genesis of something that came after it. And for that reason, for what it is, for how short it is, go for it. Listen to it. Who cares?
You know, Adam,
Nice.
I have to issue a little correction here. You're like, full send. They really went for it. Two members couldn't even complete the process of making the entire album. They did not go for it. They quit halfway through.
But that's part of it, man. Like
Is
it's
that-
so
that's the
chaotic
most
they
punk?
can't keep it fucking together. Like it barely came together, you know?
Yeah, I do know. I experienced it.
And maybe even from that perspective, as something that really shouldn't exist. Like it exists, and this is what it is.
You're referring to, I believe the word is an abomination.
Yes.
Something that should not exist but does exist.
Yeah, and I would, you know, that word probably exists somewhere in the written lyrics of this album as well. It should.
I'm sure. All right. So we got one yes and one no. Rob, what say you, good sir?
You know, guys, if listening to Beethoven makes you smarter, then it stands to reason that there must be some music that makes you dumber while you listen to it. And I think this is a really good contender. So I'm going to say no. I agree with Original Adam that the story had an opportunity to turn my mind around. But the truth is, I think these guys just stumbled ass backwards into something. And yeah, they may have kicked off a revolution I don't give a shit about, which normally would get them extra points. But the fact that they were barely hanging on to any of it, an idea, a vision, any of it. And, you know, by the way, I meant what I said about the 1 second song. I would consider adding that to a 1001 songs you should listen to. But I think the 1.3 seconds is about as much as you need to hear from this band.
Ooh. All right. So we got 2 no's and 1 yes. It all comes down to me. And, you know, we've experienced it a lot on this show. The person who goes out and has to do the research kind of ends up really immersing themselves in the band and gets invested in the story of the band and really comes to appreciate the work more than just the music on its face and helps it fold in the story for that. And that did not happen this week because I don't want to listen to this album anymore. And I don't think you should have to listen to this album. And yeah, a bunch of barely not homeless crust punks get together and shit out an album over the course of 2 days. Fantastic. I'm glad some people like it. And it's cool that it kicks something else off. I don't like it, and I don't like what it kicked off. And so, no, I don't think you have to listen to it. Sorry, Napalm Death.
Go listen to Steely Dan.
Yeah, right.
Listen, I'm not saying people have to listen to Steely Dan either. Well, I haven't had to officially say that on the show yet. When it comes up, you'll see what my vote is. Woo, suspense.
Oh, God, talk about your Loadmaster. When you guys draw Steely Dan, listen, Tom's going to bust.
If Guantanamo Bay is using your music as torture, that is a sign.
I mean, I don't dislike specifically Mick Harris. He seems, again, like a cool guy. I don't dislike what they were trying to do, and I don't dislike when people try to do something, but I don't have to give the end product credit just because you tried something new. And just because it is new, it doesn't mean it's valid. It doesn't mean that you need to listen to this to understand the musical canon of the last 100 years. So
I just got a vision of the FBI trying to get David Koresh out by playing Ricky Don't Lose That Number over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Napalm Death, it seems like they might have been into that. Those Branch Davidian motherfuckers with like the grenade vests on and their AK-47s. Like, oh, hell yeah, we're about to kill some fucking ATF agents. What's up?
Is it metal?
Yeah. All right. That does it. Sorry, Napalm Death. You are not on the list. For Scum, I'm sure there's like 12 more of your albums on the list that we'll have to cover at some other point. That's why I didn't go too in depth on the story. All right. So we have a few things left to do. But before we get to our mailbag and finding out what album we're going to cover next week, we want to give a special thank you to our guest, Other Adam, who I can actually just call Adam now, I guess.
Yeah, right.
Adam, thank you so much for coming on. I am glad you liked the album. I'm slightly less better friends with you now than I was at the beginning of the episode.
That's okay. You've always been a withholding bitch.
Yeah. Why don't you tell all of the people again how they can find out more about you?
Come over to Twitch and type in the search bar, Mortimer Fathoms. It's those two words. They're together. My profile picture is a picture of a dog. Just come and watch me.
I started doing this because last month I actually went
you're like live streaming,
projecting a game called Elden Ring onto the sidewalk while people were walking by, and Elon Musk saw that, said it was cool, and that video got about 6.5 million views. And so from there,
check out his Twitch channel.
Started this channel where we go out, play video games in public.
Yes,
and you like that kind of thing, you should come over to my channel when that happens and look up Mortimer Fathoms, MORTIMER FATH.
That'd be great.
OMS.
Awesome.
Hope to see you there.
Now, Rob, why don't you reach your hand into that old mailbag and pick us out a missive that I'm sure is just going to be spelled.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that this week. So
all right.
Let's
buckle up.
dip in. First up, we have some complaints from listener Diane. She writes, just a couple comments about your Electric Warrior podcast. I am hardly even into it yet, and I have some complaints! ! First off, this guy with the vocal fry? ? She does not elaborate. I'm not sure who she might be referring to.
It really doesn't narrow it down a whole lot.
Then she shouts at us, do more research! !
Still doesn't narrow it down a whole bunch.
Then, I assume referring back to Electric Warrior, the T-Rex album, she says, for being only number 32 on the US chart, why did I hear it every day of my life growing up? I'm not sure what to say about that. We just reported on the news. We don't really comment upon it. Our last sentiment is, also, are you guys all short? ?
What the? Wow.
Yeah.
She fucking hit us where we live, dude. She roasted the shit out of me.
Fascinatingly, I think we're all above average male height, right?
Yeah, I think above average male height is about accurate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll do better, Diane. Sorry.
We appreciate you writing in to attempt to tear us down for reporting factually on chart information from the 1970s. Continue with that, please. Next up, we have listener Jack, who writes in, hi guys, I just finished listening to the Ace of Spades episode and really enjoyed it. You spent some time discussing Lemmy's character, and I just wanted to add some secondhand information. I grew up near Blackpool in England. And I used to work with someone who dated Lemmy in the 60s. While he was in the Rockin' Vickers. She described him as an incredibly kind man. He wasn't intimidating or nearly as intimidating as his persona would make you think. Finally, I happen to live in the Dingle area of Liverpool that was mentioned on the episode and he says, hearing Americans refer to it as being like the Bronx in the 70s was pretty surreal.
But he's not saying inaccurate.
He's not saying inaccurate. He's not, but like the Bronx, I imagine it might have gotten a little better since those days. But that was the story related about Ringo Starr being from the toughest area of Liverpool and actually being kind of a brawler, even though later the Beatles had their image cleaned up. Thank you for that little piece of context. We love when you write in and add to our understanding of what's going on. And I agree, as we talked about Lemmy, I think we even mentioned he has a clear sense of humor about himself, and he seemed like a pretty cool guy overall, even though he is a wild man of historic proportions. So write us more with whatever's on your mind about any episode from the back catalog. As you can see, we even read hate mail here on the show, so send it our way to 1001albumcomplaints@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Rob. And I think we might get some hate mail about this one. I think that these metalheads are pretty rabid in their fandom, and so we'll see.
You guys are going to get hate mail. I liked it.
You're going to catch some flack as well.
The only hate mail I will read about Napalm Death is if someone just sends us an email with a full paragraph of a blarg.
Has to be spelled correctly.
All right. So last thing that we have to do is to get our homework assignment for next week. I don't know about you all, but I am excited to not have to listen to this album anymore. I'm going to go listen to After the Gold Rush right after this as my decompression music. And just,
I actually listened to it this weekend, Tom. It's so
After
funny.
the Gold Rush?
Yeah, it is like the polar opposite of this.
Yeah, totally. All right, I have the Albinator here. It's been in the corner, thrashing away. It's got completely DIY fucked up clothing on, and it smells horrendous. I'm going to see if I can pull it out of its stupor and bring it over here to spit out next week's album. So without any further ado, drum roll, please. We will be listening to the album is Life Through a Lens, and the artist is Robbie Williams.
Sounds boring.
It's a British pop star, right?
Yeah, I remember a video maybe in the late 90s or early 2000s where he like ripped his skin off in the video. He was like dancing with a bunch of hot chicks to like his pop song, and he like ripped his skin off, and so he was like a dancing muscles and then ripped the muscles. It was really weird.
That's like more metal than Scum.
It really it's the only thing I know about Robbie Williams.
I think he's like the UK Timberlake. Didn't he come out of a boy band or something?
I honestly thought that he was... Who's the modern guy who sung that song? Stay with me, 'cause you're all I need.
Sam Smith?
Sam Smith. Yeah. I think I thought that Robbie Williams and Sam Smith were like the same person.
Well, clearly we're in our element now.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Ready to piss off some English people.
God, we've really been going hard at the Brits. Although we did recently have our Leonard Skinner episode where we went pretty hard at the American South as well. So, equal opportunity shit talkers here.
Isn't the guy who made the list British?
Yeah.
There it is. Yep.
Very biased.
Yeah.
But, as are we, as numerous people have pointed out to us, we also have an American bias. But, because we're Americans, we're right. And so that's the lesson you should take away from that. Anyway.
They love that. All right.
Listen to Life Through a Lens by Robbie Williams for next week. I want to thank you all for listening all the way to the bitter end of this show. Thank you to Other Adam for coming on and being a guest. Hope to have you back sometime soon. For everyone here at 1001 Album Complaints, I'm Tom.
I'm Adam.
I guess I'm Other Adam.
And I'm Rob.
British.